I'd like to call the Plan Commission meeting to order on Monday, September 15th, 2025. First order of business is roll call.
Commissioner Squire, Commissioner Bowerman,
Here.
Commissioner Madere,
Here.
Commissioner Markline,
Here.
Commissioner Bosco,
Here.
Commissioner Dongera, and Commissioner Williams.
Here.
5 present, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Second item are the approval of minutes, which pass under consent unless seen otherwise. So moved, which moves us to item number 3, the approval of final plats and certified survey maps and easement releases. There are none to review this evening, which moves us to item number 4, set for public hearing. There are no items set for public hearing this evening. Also, we move to number 5, old business. There is no old business, but we are extremely excited to move to item number 6, which is new business. Presentation and update by consulting firm Grave on the recodification of the zoning and subdivision ordinance, updated zoning and districts, land uses, dimensional standards, and alternative development options. And I just want to say a few words before you all get up and present. For those of you who don't come to our meetings that often, this is a rarity that we don't have a whole lot on the agenda from the standpoint of movement directly in the city, but we have a lot on the agenda that we are going to be talking about. But what I thought I would do as the chair with the commission members that are present is just kind of reiterate what the goal of tonight is. We basically are looking at general concurrence. So we're not necessarily voting on anything. We're having discussion. We're looking at draft zoning districts, the table of contents, dimensional standards, and the alternative development standards. And I just want to give a great shout out to the consultants because this memorandum was exceptionally helpful in the process of navigating those 5 things. I think there's a portion in the memorandum that I hope you all saw. The first item is the article of zoning districts. The second is the table of contents. The third talks about the dimensional standards matrix. And then I'm just going to draw your attention to the last paragraph on that page because those are the things that we've updated as we've gone along. And sometimes I know when we have kind of conversations about this and we think we are, going forward and then taking 20 steps backward. The fact of the matter is we are moving quite well through this process. So I thought it was good that we all understand that this is a process and that we're doing, quite well in being part of that process and asking questions. And I would continue to say to the commission members to ask questions for conversation this evening. We have 2 commission members that are not here. They are going to be reviewing this and most likely reviewing the recording of this evening so that they can in turn provide their commentary as well. And then we'll talk later on about what our next steps. So thank you for listening to me, but I just wanted to let you know that, I feel good about where we're at. We got a lot of work to do, but, we're making progress. So with that, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And today, again, Craig Keener with Grafe. I'm here with my colleague, partner, Tim Schwecke of Civitech. Kathy did a great job summarizing kind of tonight's meeting. And what I thought was, this is a kind of schedule moving forward that I just wanted to update everyone on. But then my hope was we could kind of go through the presentation slide deck, which is maybe, 8 to 12 slides. And it's actually in that Grafe memo that Kathy mentioned, the very last item on there, which talks about accessory dwelling units, mixed residential housing, and tiny homes. That would be kind of what I hope after this schedule we'll talk through. And then I wanted to just use our Grafe memo to actually just give a high-level overview of, again, those items that were included in your packet as far as organization of the meeting today. As I'm talking, obviously, please feel free to interrupt or interject or ask questions that Tim and I can hopefully respond to. So what you see on the screen here today is September 15th, and what we did here is moving forward month by month. Again, our intention is for staff and or the consultant to come before you again and give an update on the drafting of different zoning and subdivision elements. So This is helpful, again, just to keep in mind that we're at one moment here in time of this update. Everything that we do present, I just want to reiterate, is a draft. Nothing has been adopted as part of this, but it helps you understand, what the current draft is for these different items. So I won't go into detail here, but you can see just an updated project schedule that we're looking at right now for the project. Any questions with project schedule?
Subject to change at any time, but go
Yes.
ahead.
Yep.
Could I make a comment? If you could go back for a second, Craig. Just
Yeah.
looking at the next 2 months in particular, you can see Article 4 and Article 8. I think on November, or in November, Article 6 is going to be a heavy lift. There's going to be a lot of material there in Article 6 to review regarding development standards. So just a cautionary note for the commission to be geared up for that one, particularly if it's coupled with a draft version of the subdivision ordinance at that time. So, thanks.
Anything else? Schedule? All right, then this presentation again is going to be focused on 3 categories here: accessory dwelling units, tiny homes, and mixed residential housing. All 3 of these topics have been maybe briefly mentioned, but we had a couple, a little bit more pointed questions that our consultant team has been asking staff. And staff, Dwayne and Brian can interject with maybe some of their answers even to these questions, but we wanted to pose them to you as a plan commission as well as we start to talk through these different 3 categories that are included in your zoning code. What I will mention as well before I kind of ask these questions is, as part of the website update and supplemental package materials, there were kind of a ADU 101 kind of fact sheet of what are accessory dwelling units and what do some other municipalities look like. It was put forward by the AARP, was kind of the resource of that. And we also did include a recent adjacent municipality, Middleton, who adopted an ADU ordinance just to get a flavor of maybe what a adjacent community looked at as well, as for you as a plan commission to look at or ask any questions either tonight or afterwards. But right now, when we look at ADUs, there's a lot of different ways that municipalities will regulate these or allow them outright or not even allow them at all in different municipalities. So what our consultant team has been looking at are different types of ADUs that potentially Janesville could allow, and also different design or regulation items as far as how they're designed, where they're allowed within the city, things like that. So there's kind of 3 questions up here, and I'll maybe go through all 5 and we can go back and forth. But the first question is, what types of ADU should or shouldn't be allowed? You can see 5 different types here that are shown. There's a detached accessory dwelling unit, an upper level, attached to the garage, and attached to the side of the house, as well as in a basement ADU. The key with ADUs are that they typically have individual access separate than the primary residence themselves. So that's kind of the big differentiator there. So some municipalities will regulate the actual type and only allow certain types there. So we want you as a plan commission to be aware of those different types and if you have any strong opinion. Second question is, what should the maximum size or floor area be for ADUs? Just as a point of reference, and Tim or staff can correct me, but we have a minimum single family
let alone paper.
Printed out your current zoning code, how many pages would it be? That's the
A
question.
lot.
Yeah.
Too many.
Yeah.
Less than the IRS code.
Yeah.
But not by much.
Yeah.
Test 1, 2, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I'm recording it on a remote recorder. I might have to put in 3 pieces.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Just, it's okay. It is all working out, one way or another. Thank you very much, and thank you for your patience, and thank you all for your patience.
Bring the cat.
So, yeah, thank you. In summary, we have 5 questions related to ADU policy considerations. Question 1 is what types of ADUs should or shouldn't be allowed? Question 2 is what should the maximum size for ADUs be? Question 3, where in Janesville or what district should allow ADUs? Question 4 is related to design. Should they be required to use the same design as the primary home on the property? Question 5, what should parking requirements be, if any? And question 6, what should the minimum setbacks be? Again, staff has looked at this and consultant discussed, but these are often questions that we want to ensure that the Plan Commission is aware of or that there's options for this type of ordinance. So I would open it up, I guess, for any questions regarding ADU policy for Janesville.
Okay.
Are we just doing ADUs, or are we doing the live-in family suites at the same time?
We can answer questions with that. So yeah, there's, if you saw, Middleton kind of differentiated between the two as a definition. And again, kind of the primary difference there is a separate kind of entry specifically for ADU versus in-family suite being the opposites in relationship there.
And I think the other, well, there's lots of opportunities for conversation, but the other is when we looked at the minimum for the single-family dwelling at 800 square feet, right? What are we looking at for size for the ADUs as well? Can you provide, I'm just going to say point counterpoint for why, I know it's a preference, right?
Yep.
But would it be fair to say that we really probably should look at minimums and maximums before we even talk about what type of ADUs or
Yeah, I can give kind of a pro and con. What I do from a high level even is ADUs are expensive, same as housing costs right now are expensive. So the amount that the market is really driving the demand for these is low right now, which I think is a benefit for municipalities. They're not going to likely see an influx of these. So one approach that municipalities will take is, while there still are standards, I would say they're not usually overly burdensome or cumbersome to really allow for that development community to, propose these, work with your staff to ensure that there's something that could have an option for that affordability. So I'll start, I would guess, with that statement with all of these questions.
I would keep the square footage of doing one of these as low as possible. I use it as a hotel room. They're like 15 by 20, some of them aren't even that big. So I keep it as low. You put a bathroom in that eats up about 60 square feet. You put in 10 feet of kitchen, that's 20 square feet. And then you just got basically a bedroom and a seating area for these ones here. I don't think they're designed to be for just a minimum. I think you can get by with 280 or be flexible.
Yeah, you can definitely go small. I would say maximums are often set because some municipalities will not want it to be over dominant or kind of large within a certain area. So you can even do, there are 2-story even, ADUs that, if you're, have that builder who wants to do that.
Yeah.
So I would see more of an average is usually around 900 to 1,000 square feet. You'll get some municipalities allowing for higher, up to 1,200 kind of square feet for an ADU.
for the maximum?
For a maximum.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think my notion would be it would depend on the size of the principal structure.
Yep.
If it's a house is 1,200 square feet, you obviously don't want to put up a 1,500 square foot ADU.
Yep.
But if it's a big house, it would seem that maybe you could have something larger than, say, 400 or
Yep,
a specific.
proportional to the primary
Yeah,
structure as a regulation.
percentage or
Yep,
something,
yep. That
maybe
we see.
30% or something
Yep.
with a max of,
Yep.
just for a consideration. Because again, there'd be different sized lots and
That's
it
like
can all
it.
make a difference.
The side yard setbacks will give you a buildable area, which will, in many cases, will define it better than we could do by just putting a number on it.
Right, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what I'm hearing is Middleton and other communities that are looking at ADUs have built-in flexibility because of, be it the market or the nature of, maybe the very thing you're talking about, Commissioner Udare, is that it's relatively new, and what we're trying to do is manage the newness, but not necessarily restrict the newness.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with two of these, and it's not even a question, but one is parking. Usually when you require parking, it'll right away eliminate a lot of the options for an ADU to occur, because a lot of people just don't have that physical space to accommodate that. The other main thing is outside of zoning, but more of a utility connection standpoint is a bigger issue in how you can connect different utility as part of this as well.
Those are some pretty heavy-hitting questions right
Yeah.
off the bat, Craig.
This is probably more too detailed, but on the ADUs that you're familiar with or proposed, do they have separate like sewer utility connections? Or can they piggyback with the home connection?
It's the hottest topic, I would say, in most municipalities. So some will require completely separate connection, and some will
Okay.
allow the piggyback, if you want to use that terminology, to connect off an existing line.
Okay.
So that's more of a question for your building inspection and, other public works staff, have been engaged as part of this dialogue, I would say as well.
Wayne, have you given any thought to how that's going to work out for electric, gas, and sewer?
We haven't gotten into the details. I guess if the commission has an interest in formulating kind of a recommendation regarding ADUs, and again, it depends whether it's attached or detached inside another building. I think it's probably fair to say if it represents a separate freestanding building under local ordinance, and I think building code, a separate set of utilities, water and sewer service laterals would be required to connect that structure. If it's attached, perhaps that could be different, but there are a lot of different intricacies related to this that the building code will largely dictate or weigh in heavily on.
Now that we're back on this first slide, I'm an advocate for ADUs. I see so many practical uses in my own life, and so many people I know in this community that could take advantage of something like this. And so for number one, I see the benefit in all five of them specifically.
Great.
Yeah. When I looked at the Middleton, it made me realize the ability of flexibility. And for the reasons that we've kind of shared, I kind of like even where their permitted uses are. So, but what I was trying to find, because I didn't see specific information, here, the minimum required off-street parking.
Yeah, so Middleton, for example, says if there's prevalent on-street adjacent parking as defined or reviewed by the zoning administrator, that no off-street parking is required as part of that.
Yeah. So I just saw that. And I'm not asking for anyone to raise their hand if they have or have not looked at the Middleton, but it was pretty, if it's possible, vague but specific. So, but I wasn't, and the other thing that I noticed was, how have they handled the utilities? That's not mentioned.
I don't have the answer to that, but I can follow up and get back to you on that, yeah.
All right, yes.
Parking, I'm sorry.
No, you can go back.
In Middleton, they do allow then on-street parking to satisfy parking requirements. I think at minimum, if someone has an ADU, they ought to have at least one on-site parking space. I think of all the other concerns, everything from trash pickup to certainly snow removal, all of the street cleaning. It seems to me a benefit that if in fact you can get vehicles off the street. And especially, again, I think some of it may depend on the configuration, but if some of these developments may then go to, more narrow streets, which would be a complement to the development, but certainly I don't believe would be good for the ADUs. I think parking would be a concern.
I think you've pretty much eliminated anything built at or before like 1960. Because there are probably 8-foot side yards. You're not going to get a driveway through an 8-foot side yard, and they probably don't have room on their yard to do it, or you'll end up with all driveway in front and no grass.
Yeah, and then unless then we get some type of, potentially a conditional use that if they're going to put, a family member that would not require a car, then fine. But I think it's kind of a slippery slope, because if we're talking about no place to put an extra car, we're probably talking about really squeezing in then the ADU.
Is there any other conversation we need to have about in-family suites?
I didn't have anything specific. I don't know, Tim, if you have anything to add to that, or?
Questions about that?
Oh, what?
In-family suites versus the ADU? My understanding is there's no external door
Yep.
on the in-family suite.
I guess the question that is the commission supportive of including family suites as part of this?
This is basically an addition.
Right, right.
It's kind of more, I think you get a lot of questions usually, like, what, isn't this an in-family suite? And just the clarity of that it can be a completely, ADUs are completely different, occupied individuals that are not of relation, and can be completely separate from the owner.
I would say the trouble I could see on an in-family suite would be you put an addition on for grandma, because grandpa passed away. Well, she's probably up there in the years too. So in 10 years or so, granny's not going to be there. Now, who's going to take it over? Who's available to live there?
Who's allowed to live there? If it's an in-family suite,
You're limited to family.
Has to be a family member, yeah. That does create, an issue, because you'll create somewhat of an additional dwelling opportunity within the structure. And at some point, perhaps, the qualifications couldn't be met. And then it may become an enforcement
yeah, and what
issue.
department looks at those? Are you going to, see when the person dies, and then you got to go and check and see who's living there?
I mean, one example of someone that could move in could be like an adult child. It could be a niece or nephew. It could be cousin. It could be a number of things.
But it
I think
couldn't be a stranger.
I think personally it's up to that homeowner to decide whether they want it to be a family suite or ADU. I would love to see us add both to the new code and have it as little restrictive as possible, allowing these homeowners to make a decision and investment in their properties as they see fit. So for example, here on this page, number 4, option Two, for the same design when attached or detached, I would like to not have restrictions on a detached unit, because perhaps maybe there's a prefab option, right? That someone could install faster in their backyard that wouldn't be an exact match to their current. Would you say that that's kind of a common option that you see?
I would say a lot of these are custom built. There are prefab more when we talk about even kind of some of the tiny home conversation.
Sure.
So there can be that.
Okay.
But I would say at least the majority that I'm seeing right now when we talk with builders it's very customized design
Okay.
that's being
That would be
included.
different than my
Yeah.
initial thoughts, but I would like to give the option to the homeowners to invest as they see fit in their properties.
Just to comment on that, because I agree with Sabrina, other than, I would say, option 2, where in fact the design is similar, and if in fact someone wants to put in a contrary design to the main unit, they can maybe do it through conditional use. So you have some control over what might be put there.
Once again, on older buildings, some of those materials are not available.
Yeah, okay, so
Yeah.
it's a conditional use. I'm just thinking, gosh, I've always wanted a Florida crab shack
Yeah.
and be very elaborate, but
But I thought we were trying to eliminate conditional uses.
well, this would be an exception.
Okay. I'm just,
I can't help it, I'm a bureaucrat at heart, I'm sorry.
you are, but that's okay.
Okay.
It's happening all over in every city. People have an extra bedroom and they rent it out, room for rent, 50 cents. What would be the problem if grandma passes away to rent out that space to a non-family member? Just like somebody, they get a duplex or something and they can't afford the rent, so they bring in a roommate. Why is this any different?
Well, and I'm just going to take it a step further, which is, who would be minding anybody else's business about who's in the house or who isn't in the house? So, I think,
So even outside of zoning, there is regulation, from the state for, short-term rental, if you want to call it that, where there's different, regulations that would come into play if you're, renting out specific space within your home. So I would say the municipality will be protected, outside of this ADU, ordinance, if that becomes something that's explored more with these.
yeah, I think, I would lean more into flexibility and not the what-ifs and the rabbit hole of what, I understand we have to be good stewards, but we don't have all the answers, and I don't want well, if it's Tuesday and it's a full moon and it's the third month, and, that we're trying to, jimmy rig a situation. So I think what I'm hearing from the commission is we want ADUs as part of we also are interested in the in-family suites. We recognize that there may be some, I don't even want to call them technicalities, some occurrences, because we don't know what we don't know. I also would say that, I'm embarrassed to say this, but I don't even really know what our Airbnb policy is within the city, right? So to your point, it could be somebody might just decide it's a perfect environment for Airbnb rental, right? So I think we just have to kind of go with what we know right now. And what I did hear was parking we need to give some thought to parking.
I'm probably on the opposite end. I think I agree with Commissioner Markline that having a parking restriction is going to limit homeowners' ability to invest in ADUs on their property. And if we need to add no parking signs on first, Tuesdays because the trash is coming on the right side of the road, then, that's something to explore down the road. But I would like us to implement the ADUs and have as minimum restrictions on it as possible.
And then we talked briefly about conversations about the minimum, and we're flexible. We actually talked about the fact that we like all the options. We don't want to limit detached, upside down, two-story, whatever. We like the concept.
Great. Very,
I'd
very
be
helpful.
interested in hearing the language that the commissioner suggested on flexible square footage based off of square footage
Portion.
of the
Yep.
initial residence, primary residence.
Yep, sounds
Be
good.
interested in reading that language.
Yep, we can look at that and give some examples.
And there was one other question that you asked that you were going to get the answer from, and now I can't. think-
Utilities.
Oh,
Utility, yeah, so, yep, we can look at that too.
Okay.
I had one concern on a Middleton one, and that was their A on the last page, where basically it says that if you do any of these buildings, that the primary residence has to be occupied by the landowner for at least 10 months. I would have problems with 10 months. Maybe primary residence and maybe 6 months and a day, but, you know, a lot of the people like to go away for the winter. Something to think about.
Does the commission support the ownership factor?
Huh?
The ownership factor?
I
Yeah.
don't think it needs to be primary residence personally, and I agree with your thoughts on their wording about having number of months restriction that they're in the hall.
Yeah, it's a good question. So the topic that often municipalities will require is that either the ADU or the primary single-family structure must be owner occupied. That's not a requirement. You could say, we don't care, you know, someone could own it and rent out both, you know, as one approach. But most municipalities will require, again, one of those to be owner occupied. Middleton added a definition of owner occupied
Yeah.
being 10 months, and I think what you're saying is, let's relax that
Yeah.
to 6 months potentially. And I think, Sabrina, what you're saying is the owner occupied could be the ADU as well versus the single family,
Actually,
or not
I
at
don't
all.
think I would like any restrictions on
Gotcha.
that.
So no owner occupancy requirements at all for a property.
I'm trying to figure out what the purpose of that is. I know it looks like it's an agreement purpose.
Yeah. I would say it can come from different approaches as to the why certain municipalities will do that. I think part of it is ensuring, you know, property maintenance and appearance of a property is upheld,
Right.
is one reason that I would say I hear municipalities requiring that owner occupancy.
And that would be, thank you for saying that. That
Yep.
would be just, it wouldn't be a hesitation, it would be a concern as someone who has sat on the council, and we've had multiple conversations about landlords that are not present and the challenges that has impacted the respective neighbors and neighborhoods. So I think that, you know, I'm not suggesting one or the other, but it is, to me, a genuine concern about, are we losing sight of that? Because that is a big deal.
We also have property owners that are pigs.
Right. Oh, no, I mean,
Yeah.
you can't, right.
It's
I
not
totally
exclusive
get
to
it.
rentals.
Exactly, I totally get it. But, so maybe that's another enforcement question.
Well, I think what we're trying to do is, to the extent possible, corral some of the preferences of the commission in drafting a code. And so I think we've gotten a lot of good
Yep.
feedback. And at
Yeah.
this point,
Okay, good.
I think that the task here is to try and take that input and formulate a draft set of provisions for you to react to.
Okay, good. Well, thank you for
Yeah.
that presentation.
Nope, this is
You're not
great.
done.
Nope. Now Tim gets to talk and spend less time than I did on ADUs. Sorry, Tim. I'll advance it here, I think. There we go.
So basically,
Try it again.
okay, good. So basically, one of the things that obviously is driving a lot of the code work that we're doing
Tim,
is
for the members of the audience, could you introduce yourself?
Tim
please?
Schweike. So, again, one of the major drivers of the entire zoning code rewrite is to create more housing options and address the affordability issue. So talked about ADUs as one part of that. Talked about in-family suites as another part of that. And both of those are, baked into the standard zoning code itself. So if you look at your table, there's a listing for ADUs and there's a listing for in-family suites. And then this is paired with that dimensional table. So basically, we've built in these as permitted by right with standards. So that's under the umbrella of a standard zoning code. And now what we're going to be talking about is kind of a custom approach to zoning. And previously, I think we had talked about this at that point in time. We were talking about this as a R8 district. So we, with staff and so on and so forth, we kind of, took a second look at that same concept, but we just kind of called it a mixed residential housing district. So on the left-hand side is a schematic, and there's, obviously 5 different kinds of housing types, single family all the way up to multifamily. On the right-hand side are some photos of an existing development. Townhouses up front with the 4-story, 5-story multifamily in the back. That was put together by a single developer as an integrated project. So again, kind of setting the context, basic standard zoning. And what we're talking about is a hybrid or a custom kind of zoning approach. When we're talking about the mixed residential housing district, the land uses are predefined, but the lot sizes and building heights can be customized. Okay? So, next slide. And you can stop me at any point in time. So, I'm going to put my glasses here. So just a real run through of what this looks like. This is an optional tool. Some communities, they actually require it. If you do a certain kind of project, you have to do a mixed housing development approach. So that's one thing that we can talk about a little bit later. At its core, developer has to come forward with at least 2 different housing types. Family and townhomes, or it could be multifamily and townhomes, or it could be any mix of those housing types. The minimum project size has to be at least 10 acres. And the starting point that we're looking at right now is the maximum density would be 20 units per acre. Okay, so you basically calculate your net developable area, multiply it by 20 or whatever that number is. That gives you a certain number of dwelling units. Those dwelling units can be mixed and matched, again, based on the kind of housing product that you're trying to create. In terms of the process, though, this is essentially a rezoning application. We're going from some residential to the mixed residential housing district. As part of that, then, there's going to be a public hearing before Planning Commission, public hearing before City Council, and it's treated like any other zoning application, except there's going to be more details. The details are going to look something like that schematic in terms of the housing types, where they're going to go. You're looking at adjoining properties, what are they like? And then based on that developer, schematic and their proposal, you can identify if that's a good project or not. And you're treating it like a rezoning. So you have total control. Okay? If the project is approved, then it's not really done until developer comes forward with a preliminary plat, final plat, or very detailed schematics. So that's kind of the what it looks like and kind of the process. And I'll pause right there to see if there's any questions about that.
Have any questions?
It's similar to like a PUD. You could also incorporate some type of commercial use in this as well.
So it's very similar to a PUD. except that a PUD has two steps. A general development plan, which is
Right,
kind of like a rezoning, but then you have to come back with more detailed,
Right, right.
you know, architectural drawings. That's not what we're proposing here. Simply to say, what kind of lots are you creating? What they look like, that's immaterial at this point in time.
Okay, but you could incorporate some type of small commercial or whatever?
Right now, I think we have certain, low-intensity commercial as allowable uses within this zoning district, yes.
Or if you've got a larger property, you could do a part of it as mixed residential housing, and then identify a parcel for your, you know, traditional business zoning classification.
Okay.
For example, I can't remember if it was this same exact district, but we had talked about being able to add childcare into a community like this. Was that added?
Yes, yep.
Yes,
Childcare facility?
yes. We actually added it here, but we added it to some of the single-family districts as well. Okay, any other comments, questions about the concept, process?
Semi-related. I'm not talking in my theory on a standalone retail. I'm thinking if you're gonna go in here and do a 4-unit, to have the first floor be neighborhood retail and the top 3 floors be housing. Is that something that would fit in an MRH, or are we looking at a different district for that?
Probably a different district. It depends kind of on where you're looking. So how we phrase this is these are like 10-acre tracts of land or larger. So probably more on your, undeveloped outskirts, maybe a couple select properties. But more you're talking about is either within an existing business district that will now allow for residential, either on the ground floor or above, like you're saying.
Yeah.
Or I think it's just your business. I was going to say the high-density residential. I don't think we're allowing for commercial within that district right now. So yeah, it would just be more within the proposed business districts allowing for that residential use there.
One thing I recently saw that was new to me was a 4-unit, 3 floors of housing. And the first floor was, half of it was amenities for the tenants.
Yep.
But they also put in a coffee house / nightclub open to the public on the first floor as an amenity to residents, but also to keep it viable, that the public was welcome to come as well. And so I'm just, if something like that would come up in a new subdivision area, I just curious how amenable what we're looking at would be to something like that.
I would say nightclub is probably not listed as a permitted use. Just to be, transparent, there would be a definition for that. So that very specific example. But I would say more so we're definitely accommodating mixed use buildings. So commercial, ground level with residential above. But again, what that specific commercial use is would be, of question. And the land use table that's included kind of on the project website now, and that was part of this kind of discussion today.
Yeah.
We'll list all those uses and say whether or not it's permitted or conditional.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the secret sauce to this is the 10 acres.
Yep.
And maximum 20, so maximum 200 dwelling units.
I don't know, did we put we didn't put a maximum size, but yeah.
You put example, okay, so I
Yeah.
I read it as 20 dwelling units per acre. So there is no dwelling units per acre.
You can go higher acreage on a
Okay,
project
I
site, but
looked at
yeah.
that and I
yep.
was like, okay, so 10 acres is
The minimum.
Project area.
Yep,
the project area.
Yep, yep.
I think what I'm hearing from the commission members is, I don't think necessarily that is, we want the ability to have flexibility of the, not the nightclub,
Yeah.
but, the childcare and all those
Yeah.
things. And I think that is, if we're looking at 10 acres, right? We don't want to not be able to do that.
I think the benefit and flexibility that we've definitely built in is when you look at your proposed, R1, proposed R2, and proposed R3, all of those now are also allowing for increased densities. So, whether that's number of principal structures, that are permitted by right or additional ones with conditional use. So that's building in that flexibility. And then the commercial uses, again, are starting to be flexible and introduced as either conditional or allowed within different residential zoning districts as well. So it doesn't just have to be this kind of mixed residential housing. This district is really, I would say, focused to kind of larger kind of tracts of land where the city says we want not just one type of housing. We just don't want just single family. We want to encourage more of these mixed density neighborhood developments throughout the city.
Okay, so I heard what you said about it's kind of like a rezoning, but I'm going to throw it out to you, Dwayne, and to the two of you. Help me understand the review and the approval process. I just want, we're used to PUDs, we're used to, conditional use, so I'm trying to wrap my head around what that looks like in this particular
Yep.
zone, so to speak.
So again, it's going to be up to the developer to put together a well-conceived development plan. And it's going to be, depending on the size of the property, depending on the number of housing units, it could be a simple schematic showing the number of lots, showing streets, or it could be an actual preliminary plat if the land is to be further subdivided. So that would be, submitted as part of the rezoning application. It would be a separate action, but it informs whether it makes sense to do the rezoning or not.
Right, so, but that becomes, to some extent, a binding document in the rezoning process, correct?
It's part of the approval, yes.
Okay,
You can't come back and say, oops,
right. I just,
Yep.
okay, so we get that done. So then the rezoning happens, right?
Yep. And then developer, works through that preliminary final plat process, actually creating the parcels, and once all those conditions of approval are met, then the rezoning is finalized. It's not final until all those, necessary steps are done.
Okay,
Zoning, but it stays as MRH when it's completed.
Yes.
Okay, so to that point, if you go back to, I think, the previous page, so for the ADUs, would only the yellow properties be able to add a dwelling unit?
So basically, the way we've got the ADU is, set up is basically it has to be associated with a single-family house.
Okay. But it would be allowed in an MRH district?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So you're saying earlier, a developer would work it up using these guidelines, and you're trying to keep it as flexible as you can. So he's in his office, makes a couple sketches, likes one of them, brings it to the city. He has no guidance at that point from the city what they're looking for. So when does that discrepancy be worked out?
So, I think it's Article 8, talks about all these different custom zoning approaches. So there's going to be some guidance with regard to the mixed residential housing district in terms of project size and density and, so on and so forth. And the criteria that the Plan Commission, the City Council will use in deciding if that's a good proposal or not. So there's going to be some guidance, but ultimately it's going to be on developer to put together a really well-conceived plan. And if they do that, the process is really straightforward.
I guess when they come forward to get the approval, what criteria does the Plan Commission have to turn it down? I mean, what would they have to do that it wouldn't be acceptable? Because it seems like I come forward with this and I've dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's.
So basically, when you adopt a zoning code and when you adopt a zoning map, it's a legislative kind of decision. There's no right or wrong. It's basically what your policy is. And same thing with a typical rezoning. It's a legislative matter. If it makes sense, you can approve it. Doesn't make sense, you can say no. It's legislative, and that's the best avenue if you want to have the highest level of control.
But that's the very beginning. That is the very beginning without actually seeing the potential for the final product.
Other parts of the code will talk about the architectural standards for, townhouses and multifamily and so on and so forth. And so basically that will run through that process. You're not going to see architectural renderings at the rezoning application because that's kind of above and beyond what you're kind of looking at, which is what kind of housing is going to be developed. Single family, townhomes, multifamily.
I think the other thing, to answer your question is think of your current rezoning, projects right now. If you're gonna rezone something, let's say just to your highest density residential, what would you as a plan commissioner say, you want to understand? Obviously, consistency with comprehensive plan. So this district is really gonna align with your, neighborhood, type uses that are talked about in your comprehensive plan for future use designation. But what else do you as a plan commission want to turn to be able to say, yep, this is something that we want to see rezoned? So if there is something specific, I guess, that's, what we'd want to hear. But what Tim, I think, and I are talking with staff is there is a strong level of flexibility that, will come into this.
Maybe I can give some perspective, at least as we've been having these conversations with with the consultants. I don't think there's any way around providing a certain amount of detail with the rezoning step up front. And as Tim mentions, it's not to look at specific elements of detail, architecture, and necessarily the amenities. It's to define the mix, a combination of residential housing types, the densities, the lot sizes, the number of those in each category, and essentially building out your 10-acre, 12-acre, 15-acre, whatever the project size may be, at or above that minimum, with a list of, conditions. It's a conditional rezoning. So provided the zoning is approved, subject to those conditions by the city council, the developer applicant would go back and prepare those more detailed plans that would then come forward in part or in whole under a land division request, which then comes to the Plan Commission, gets recommended on to the City Council under that process you're familiar with. To me, the key to this is backfilling the rest of the zoning ordinance with those development standards that get at design, architecture, landscaping, parking, spatial arrangement of structures and meeting all those requirements. Where this differs from the current review process is that a number of residential projects that come forward, such as this with multiple buildings on one site, are reviewed under a planned unit development form of review following the conditional use permit process, where the Plan Commission has exercised discretion in a variety of those zoning factors that relate to those projects. This would be different in the sense that once the rezoning is approved, you rely upon then staff through an administrative process to apply all of those other provisions, standards, requirements that are set forth in the code pertaining to those types of land uses. So it's very much different than what you've seen before, what we've seen before, what we processed. And I guess that's my understanding. If there's any clarification, certainly jump in, but it's going to be very important, at the time of rezoning to establish those conditions of that zoning approval that the Plan Commission and as recommended to the council, and the council actually enacts. So. As far as the 10 acres go, we debated whether, should it be 5 acres, should it be 10 acres? I think that the 10 acre minimum project area requirement was kind of established, because if you're looking to create a combination of uses, this would essentially be applied in areas of outward growth, not necessarily infill sites, but areas I call generally around the perimeter of the city or periphery of the city, where you have larger opportunities to create a new neighborhood, to establish a new residential development that hits on or complies with those things that are advocated, recommended in the city's comprehensive plan for newly developing areas. But the 10 acres is just a standard we established, thought that you needed a significant enough critical mass of land area, and we thought 10 acres made sense.
I'm going to reverse engineer that question. So I'm not opposed to the 10, I'm not in favor of the 10, I'm neutral. But what happens if we have places that are appropriate for a mixed residential for infill? What does that look like? That potentially are less than.
Let's not forget that the other districts that we're proposing to create of a medium and a high density, not even to mention the R1, which we're at least at this point indicating would allow 2-family by right, up to 3 or 4 dwelling units, subject to a conditional use review and approval. And then in the R2 and the R3, you have a use by right in the R2 district of 1 to 8 dwelling units, 9 or more by conditional use, and then beyond that, you have the higher density district. Nothing would prohibit the rezoning of the site to either of those districts to allow for a combination of dwelling units in those areas. So it's not all or nothing with the mixed residential district. This is a district that is I think, being developed and targeted for those other areas, but perhaps Tim or Craig could talk about the infill and why perhaps this may not be as appropriately applied.
I think that's a great summary, if that answers your question. I think the MRH, think of, again, you're asking your development community to create a neighborhood. It's
Right.
real. So infill is different.
Right.
It can still accommodate these multiple housing types and densities, but this is really the intent of this is, we're creating these new neighborhoods, throughout Janesville.
And I will be, in the spirit of truthfulness, I asked the question so that people here would understand the dynamic of infill and
Yep.
Mixed residential.
So what's on the slide is a simple, diagram again, and paired with a table. And it's going to identify which of the lots are going to be single family, what's going to be duplexes, what are going to be townhomes. What's key is the maximum number of dwelling units. And just by way of example, I picked 48. So it's up to developer to say, I want to do 48 or I want to do 42, and fill out the chart, identify the minimum lot sizes by housing type, setback requirements that they're proposing, and come up with a custom configured dimensional standards table just for their project. So again, that would be one part of your calculation in the rezoning, paired with that schematic. It could be a simple schematic like this, or it could be a more detailed preliminary plat.
I noticed that there's an incentive for increasing density. What would be an example of some of those incentives?
What's the next slide?
Perfect.
So there's a couple, obviously policy choices. The way it's kind of conceived right now is to apply for this, project type, you would have to have at least 2 different housing types. It could be 3, or it could be 4. What we're proposing is 2. You pick and choose whatever makes sense to you. And then the other option, and we'll get to your a little bit later, the other option is whether you want to make this optional or mandatory. Some communities, through the land division process, they basically say, if you're going to come forward with a project of a certain type, you have to have a mix of housing types, period. So, that's a policy choice. I think where staff is and the consultant team is kind of landing is just, require at least 2 and keep it optional for now. The other policy question is whether you want to create a density bonus. And again, coming back to the previous discussion about the magic number of 2 housing types, to kind of incentivize more, you can basically, offer a density bonus. So for, 10 to 20 acres, you have to have at least 2. And if you go 20 or more, then you can have a density bonus, depending on the number of housing types. So those two tables kind of work together.
So the density bonus is simply that you can add more residences to your.
You can add more DUs for the more housing types that you offer. Yes.
I would be good with the density bonus, and I would keep it optional. Those would be my two cents.
Agree. No. I was trying to figure out how you define larger projects. I'm just assuming it's acreage.
Yeah, a larger project would be like over a certain
Right.
acreage size. So,
Okay, that's
some
fine.
municipalities will say, even like we're using 10 acres, some municipalities would say, okay, you're doing a 10-acre development, you have to have, 3 different types of housing types here. You can't just do a single-family subdivision, which right now, someone in Janesville could just not rezone it to MRH and have it be your single-family zoning.
That's what I don't want to see.
Right. Well, I like the fact that, more than 2 housing types.
More than 2.
Well, that requires more than 2 housing types.
Yeah,
think.
I agree with that.
But have it be optional.
Yeah.
But even on a large acreage, say 200, more than a 10 acre, say a 20 acre site, and we're looking to create neighborhoods, it would seem that maybe more than 2 housing types would be appropriate.
Any other, are you hearing,
Yeah, I think it's clear.
all right.
Maybe one last, since we're still on this topic,
Yeah.
maybe Tim or Craig could explain how an amendment works. If a
Oh, yeah.
project goes through the process, gets conditionally rezoned, and let's just say a portion of the proposed development is pursued or completed, and then market forces change or developer preferences change, how does that work?
Or even if you take it a step further, if I'm understanding with the whole rezoning, if we were to suggest something and then the council looks at it and they say nay to a certain portion of it,
But
and
that-
then it comes
sure.
back, right?
I don't know about that.
Well, I'm just saying. But
No, I don't
answer-
think that's the case.
Okay,
but-
well, I just want to make sure.
So basically, if there's an approval, and if there's a final plat, okay, and developer, for whatever reason, the market turns or whatever, they change their mind, which is fine, then they would have to go back through the same process that they did to get the approval in the first place. So if you go back to the previous slide with the one table, and, there they've got the housing types by lot number, if they want to change the minimum lot size for one or more of those, then they would go through a text amendment process. Just like somebody wanting to change a 7-foot side yard to 5 foot or whatever. So it's an amendment process. There's a public hearing with the plan commission and on to the city council.
What about a timeline? Like, for instance, with our conditional use permit, we've got a year, right?
It would be permanent. Yeah, there's no
Okay. I'm
timeline.
just- I'm-
Upon
I'm
approval,
just
there's
throwing
no,
it out there.
correct, yeah, yes.
Right. So again, it all goes back to those conditional requirements that you impose as part of the rezoning process. You can basically say that, you have approval. However, if there is a certain timeline that you have to complete various phases, and if you don't, then the property is not rezoned. The part that's done obviously is, but the part that's vacant or undeveloped, that is not.
So,
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
well, one more hypothetical, the MRH, if the developer would not select single-family and duplex, in that case, it would just be zoned R1, is that correct? Or would someone be MRH allowed to select those as their two options? Because we want to increase density, right?
Right. So basically, they're identifying housing type. Okay, single-family, duplex, townhomes, zero lot lines, whatever.
That's type 1, and then multifamily is type 2?
No.
Okay.
No, it would be different. Like, single family is one type, duplex would be a separate type of housing type. So that could be the two types, if I'm summarizing that correctly.
Okay, yeah.
That's the question, right, Sabrina, I think?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't seem to, if the developer was in the MRH, it doesn't seem to increase the density as we would want. It wouldn't be any different than in R1.
Yeah, I'm wondering how we would handle something if it was a 30 acre parcel, but the developer doesn't have that deep of pockets to pull it all off. Can you break this into phases and do a master plan for 30 and then do 10, 10, and 10? And you might not get to the multifamily till the second phase.
So you can do phases. Obviously, you don't want to get into the situation where a developer just does single family and says, I'm done, and walks away. So there are going to be some, conditions of approval that phase 1, you have to have at least 2 types, not all the same type. So there's that safeguard. So again, just because you're rezone MRH and the market goes, south, doesn't obligate you to, carry forward, but you have that in your back pocket.
So the whole parcel could meet your DU per acre, and the first phase might not meet it, might be under
Correct.
in your situation, and then the second phase actually would be over if you just count it as a 10 acre, but it buys off the first 10. And when you're all done with 30, you're at like this one here, you're at your 46 or whatever.
So basically, it's the overall project.
Yeah. Okay. As long as we work that into it, I think that's
Could senior...
the way people are going these days is they can't get a bank to bankroll the whole 30 acres at once. They want to see how you do.
Yeah, and it's becoming more apparent as I'm listening to this district that it's in the sausage making that is where it's
Yeah.
pretty intense, which is to what I think you were referring to, Dwayne, is,
Yeah.
putting those standards all into place. I think what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that we like the district, we like the concept, this is nice. But we're also have a lot of hypotheticals or scenarios that are kind of the sausage-making process that we haven't gotten into yet.
I think that's fair.
My standpoint with ADUs, I wanted this MRH to be more accessible for the developer and just more streamlined and easier. So, like, for example, I'm looking at this land use table chart in MRH. Why would a nursing home not be acceptable for this type of development? It seems like it might fit in well. There's other examples here. where was it? Like outdoor seating, small outdoor seating for a small cafe that was in that neighborhood. I would love to see that added, just to add more flexibility for these neighborhoods. Public EV charging facility could be a small one, but it might be necessary in a neighborhood like this.
Again, what you're doing is referring to this table.
Yeah.
It's basically the use table, and it identifies the different, land use that are allowed within MRH. Community centers are allowed.
Daycare centers. We talked about
Daycare.
that one.
Parks, daycare, community gardens, parking lots, schools. So, maybe we haven't hit all the points, but that's basically the intent, is to allow some of these other, kind of low-impact commercial to be part of the overall district.
Yeah, like a nursing home might seem appropriate, I would think, to add to that category.
Sure.
So on that topic, one of the things I think we'll be circling back to in November relates exactly to that. What are the commercial establishments that should be allowed in residence districts? And there are a limited number here that you're seeing as you scroll through this. But back in July, there was at least a presentation slide and discussion on examples of neighborhood scale commercial within residence districts, and the consultant had put forward some criteria referred to as supplemental standards that talked about no more than 4 parking stalls, to accommodate that use, be permitted off or on-site, off street, that they should be located on a corner lot, in an intersection or along commercial or arterial roads, and limited building size and hours of operation. Those are things that are likely going to come back when we talk about this Article 6 in development standards, because within each land use category, by land use definition, you see what the requirements will be. So not that we're going to resolve that now, but I want the commission to think about that and keep thinking about that and share with us now or in between the time we get back to a draft, distribution of that article, to think about what other types of land uses you think neighborhood scale commercial, not just for the RH or MRH district, but for R1, R2, and R3. Because those criteria and those standards that tie back to those uses that make them appropriate in that district are what we need to determine is necessary or appropriate here in Janesville. So, does that make sense? This list that you see is trimmed back because we don't have those criteria that may allow restaurants, for example, of a certain neighborhood scale or size or type to just carte blanche be included in there.
Are there any other more questions then?
It's a good
Jim?
presentation.
So I'm not done.
Okay, we'll keep going. You
Almost
are
done.
maybe on
Yep.
that part, not
Yeah.
So the next thing we're going to talk about are tiny homes, okay? And again, this was, direction from the Plan Commission to come forward with some kind of allowance for a project built around the tiny home concept, okay? So on the right-hand side is an actual development up in Oshkosh. Just by way of background, this is, operated by a foundation, and it's intended as a bridge housing situation for families. Okay, not for singles, but for families, because that's their target market. And then they also have on-site services to help, build, skills, the capacity, so that people can, after a 2-year period of time, transition to some other housing. Okay? So again, this is, an approach that can be built into the zoning code, and we're kind of working on it now. But essentially, this would be treated as a planned development district, where they would come forward with their development plans, probably fairly detailed in terms of actual site layout and the operation and maintenance of the facility. So that's basically, typically what we see. Tiny homes, there are projects, kind of scattered around the state. Again, they're very focused and they're very, targeted to a particular population. Again, they're operated by a nonprofit or an agency that basically provides the on-site services and the management on a day-to-day basis.
So which category is this on our colored chart?
This is not in your colored chart
Okay.
because it's part of that custom, zoning category.
Okay.
So I guess the question is this kind of what you were thinking in terms of the scope and the project parameters?
Yeah, I think this is critical to have this as an option in Janesville, for a nonprofit who might like to provide this type of opportunity to our community. So explain the process then if a nonprofit in Janesville wanted to do something like this. They would not be allowed by zone because it's not a zone, so then it's conditional?
So basically, a plan development district is a kind of rezoning,
Okay.
except it's a two-part process,
Okay.
two-step process.
So it'd be like your plan developments kind of work right now, but the specific here would be, it'd be two steps. The first step would be a general development plan where they're submitting kind of the general layout and what the operations of it is. And then that gets submitted then further as a specific implementation plan. So there's no limitations necessarily of where it could be proposed in the city, similar where someone could come in right now in the city and propose a PUD anywhere that they want their certain type of development. What our proposed zoning code is saying is if we include this provision, you're kind of signaling to the community that Janesville, is aware of these and wants to allow them. And here's, the procedure. It's essentially a planned development district that would have a little bit more specificity to tiny homes and how that looks.
So essentially it could be in any plot of land within the city of Janesville. Is that what you said?
So basically, you would have to be, compliant with your comprehensive plan, which is that overall arching, vision for your community. And as long as, that fits within that matrix, then yeah, developer can come forward and here's my property, here's my, proposal, and you go through that two-step process.
And so that wouldn't need to come to the commission at all because it would already be in the zone. It would just go to the city council then?
No, it would go through the two-step rezoning
Oh.
process, so plan commission and council with public hearing. Yep.
Okay.
And just so we're all on the same page, are we all assuming that the tiny home concept would be affiliated with a potential nonprofit? Okay. The reason why I bring that up is oftentimes that's through WPHD, the Wisconsin Partnership Housing Development, because they form a liability nonprofit agreement. So I just want to make sure we're not necessarily saying just tiny homes, that they're, tiny homes as it relates to that bridge concept affiliated with a potential social assistance. So, yeah.
Just Craig, this tiny home concept seems to have come about in the last several years. And do you know why? I mean, it would almost seem for land use purposes, it would be better to have townhouses, for transition as opposed to, you could have the same amenities, clubhouse or the training centers or so forth. But why the tiny house things? It almost, well, I just don't, I'm not opposed to it, I just don't understand why.
I don't know if I have a great answer. I don't know if, Tim, you have any better background
Barrier of
to it.
entry is going to be lower.
Your what?
Barrier of entry is going to be lowered to
Is-
construct it.
As far as costs, you're saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
a tiny home compared to a townhouse.
So depending on how the nonprofit, operates, they might say there's no charge to live here. Okay, as opposed to having to buy and take out a mortgage for a townhome or even a small single-family house. So it's going to be, again, short-term bridge housing for those people that can't otherwise find a place to live. So I guess that's the unmet need.
I feel like some of the marketing that I've seen is a little bit more of a social aspect or feeling of kind of ownership if it's a separate actual kind of structure versus, attached townhome configuration. I've seen some kind of marketing more of that, to kind of have your own space and structure, but I can't speak to why with some of these other ones. Detached versus attached type of
You know,
thing.
have most of these been pretty successful, you know, or?
I think the
Yeah.
idea is
Yeah.
successful. It's basically getting the money and the resources and the long-term management kind of, figured out. And, obviously, it's a long-term commitment, so it takes funding.
And it's a sense of community.
Yeah, I would say
And-
they're very mission-driven, and I think a very strong community, value to these types of developments,
Right.
yes.
Often skill set training, to help people.
The, getting them built and rented out, the first initial burst of energy is wonderful. You talked about after 10 years. What happens in these ones, or how do you phrase it in such a way that if the sponsoring nonprofit or sponsoring agency decides it's not in their mission or they're not financially able to do it, who ends up with it?
So it could be operated by a nonprofit. It could be operated by a governmental entity. So, I mean, it could be, the case that the nonprofit says to government, I can't do this anymore for whatever reason. Government says, yeah, we can take it over. But, in the absence of that, it could be the case that it just falls apart and it can't be operated as a tiny homes project.
Okay, I'm just, when they first come in, the first group is excited, but after 10 years, they start getting in their 70s. They don't want to do it anymore, and they don't bring anybody along, and the organization can't survive. And I'm just concerned there's got to be some sort of out down the road you just can't get dumped on the community.
Maybe you could do some more work on like that particular conversation, because they are relatively new, right?
Yeah.
And there are other Wisconsin communities that have them. Again, don't necessarily want to go down the rabbit hole of not being successful, but I
Oh, I
certainly
want it to
hear.
work, but-
Right, I certainly hear your point, and I think if we could get a little bit more information, but I think the general consensus is that we want tiny homes.
Yeah.
What other communities have done as far as some type of condition on it that, these homes, obviously, we don't want individuals coming in and we're just gonna buy these and then rent them out to whatever, vacation home or something. So if it's gonna be a tiny home village to help people transition, what are the conditions that you can put on that? Because being on the city council, the county is the one that gets the money for social programs, not the city. So who's going to take this over if the nonprofit that started it, again, leaves? Where do we go from there? And have other cities put those conditions on? And then does it come down to the point that that organization that paid for it, do you have the right then, if nobody else wants to take it over, does the municipality have the right then to go in and say, these have to be removed? Or, I don't know, what do you do?
So I think that's a very valid, topic, and, potentially if they have a bank financing, obviously the bank is going to end up with it. And then they're going to figure out, okay, what do we do? Who do we approach? Who do we, kind of bring into this? So, I mean, that's a whole part of that land development process that we actually don't see until they come forward with something, so.
But to maybe like help any concerns out, like the nonprofit, from the way you guys have described it, the way I understand, can't just turn around and do whatever they want with this. This is
Right.
this is not falling within any of our residential business categories. It's a very specific use. So there's already that protection built in just to the category as it's currently drafted, correct?
Yep.
But this is a single parcel.
Yeah.
It's not, divided up in any way. It's one large parcel with any number of small tiny homes.
So the protection's there then.
I mean,
I think what you're hearing is, we're supporting tiny homes, there might be some additional information that would like to be looked into.
so if you go back to the previous slide, I'm sorry. So on the left-hand side, those are all the things that we've been kind of talking about. Again, those are those custom zoning districts, and there's going to be lots more detail when we bring forward that article. So,
Madam Chair, just a quick question. So you believe the consensus of our group is to, when we do have the zoning ordinance completed, we would have the section on tiny homes?
Correct. Correct.
Yep, right now, if you look at kind of the table of contents, it's within Article 8, that kind of last article, alternative development options, and it has that Division 7 tiny home projects. It would fall within that article.
I just want to say, this cleanup of this table of contents was very impressive.
And thank Dwayne for that.
I was going to
Yep.
say,
I really, succinctly,
We thank Brian for that.
I really
There you go,
like it.
Brian.
Really like it.
So what I just wanted to close on, and we can talk more as well, but again, for the general public as well, who attend or kind of look at this, we do have a project website, and when you go to that project landing page on the right side, you're going to see, different public meetings as well as, draft articles. So everything that we've talked about today, the presentation, and then this memo too that Kathy mentioned at the beginning kind of summarizes everything that's been submitted as a draft to the city here. So again, the key updates are there's a new table of contents that have been restructured. There's a draft article, which is your zoning district. So here it, again, lists every single zoning district. What is the character intent, of that zoning district within the city. There's an updated land use table, which some of you have been referencing, which again lists every zoning district, lists what's permitted, what's conditional, that's needed to review. And then there's a dimensional standards matrix, which will actually be part of a future article. But that again lists the very specific, lot size minimum, setbacks, minimum green space, and the like. So Tim and I are happy to walk through kind of any of those specific things, but also know that that's been, vetted a lot with your staff, and I feel like we're, moving in a very strong direction, but we're happy to answer any questions that if anyone looked at those ahead of time or could talk through those as well.
I'll defer to the other commission members if you have any questions regarding, and that's, and when you look at the memo, that is, well, we see it, it's right there.
I think the land use table is very approachable for a layman to look at each category and kind of get a really good understanding of what our new code will look like. Once we pair that with a map, it's going to be a home run. It's going to be very approachable. That's what we're going for, simplifying. And so I like to come back to this land table use.
Great.
Right now?
No, in general, as we're
Okay,
as we're
I was
going
like- I
along.
wasn't sure. I wanted
No,
to-
I think it's just, it feels more organized today, like
Oh,
to your point with the
for
table
sure.
of contents. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. I'm feeling it. Any other draft deliverables that anyone would want to bring up right now? I think it's great. I think, not to move it along, but to Dwayne's point, November is not that far away. And that's going to be with, was it Article 6 or 8?
Yes.
Article 6. That'll be a big deal. To Commissioner Bowerman's point, simplified. We're building this with the end user in mind, which is exceptionally important. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's still an open house out there that needs to happen, which would then potentially address end user in mind concepts as well. So we're moving, but we got a lot more work we have to do. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Dwayne, from a
I don't-
timeline perspective.
Sure. Well, you can see it up on the screen now. When we talked about tiny homes, and Craig had just mentioned that the alternative development options, that Article 8 includes tiny homes. Well, that's next month. So research on that and formulation of a draft, a set of regulations regarding that development option is actually near term. The procedural requirements, Article 4, that's a lot of, I guess what I would refer to as the technical kind of backbone of how we move through certain approval processes and procedures, and it affects the wide variety of activities that the zoning code addresses regarding districts and site plan review and architectural review, variances, and so on and so forth. So much of the content in November is really not so much policy driven. It's much more straightforward, and a lot of that stuff is actually etched in statutory requirements in terms of its framework. But I think, like I said, the heavier lift is in November. That's where we get into a lot of the design aspects of development and how that ties back to uses that are listed in the various zone districts. And so, there's a lot of information that'll be coming. We'll be distributing this according to the schedule. You mentioned or made reference to an open house. The intent for the open house is to schedule that and host that upon the fulfillment or completion of a full draft text, document, not piecemeal, not just certain articles or sections, but we're moving along in this review process to build that and assemble that full document at year's end, and then provide full opportunity for comment on the entire document. And that's altogether separate from the application of zoning districts, which is the citywide remapping that will occur as a result of the creation of the newly proposed districts. And so I guess I envision that will be a separate open house to cover both of those major aspects. Other than that, Brian, what am I forgetting? Not to put you on the spot, but is there anything else we wanted to mention? I guess the only thing I would say, as the commission, leaves here tonight, if you think of things, call me, email us. If you're so inclined, post something to the project website, which is what we encourage everyone to do. That's kind of the central clearinghouse for all information related to this project. But any of those options work. And we didn't go through all of the changes, but I think, as you mentioned, they were well outlined and documented in the memorandum that Ray put together. So questions on any of those aspects, certainly let us know. But we appreciate the input.
One, just a quick question. The zoning ordinance that we're looking at does not preclude other construction techniques. Bringing in, how a lot of buildings right now are pre-built, assembled in factories, brought here. None of this that would be more the building code, wouldn't it? Okay, because I know one of the kind of things we've talked about on this, and one of the reasons we're talking about higher density and everything else, is to try to create some affordable housing, however you define that. And so, so that, because I think there's I read about new building techniques and so forth, which may lower the price as opposed to just going to, regular stick-built construction.
Yeah, this is regulating land use, not the manner in
Right, I
which
just wanted to make sure,
use is constructed.
because I think that's going to have a big part of stabilizing costs, if that's the right word. Otherwise, I thought you guys, this is really, really very good.
Loved the memo.
Good.
I thought
We'll do one every month.
I hope so. Seriously. It level sets everyone.
Tim and I were joking, though, that we would alternate, so he's going to offer the next one.
Okay,
We'll
well,
see if it's as good.
Whew.
Yeah.
Then we'll grade it. We'll grade it. Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. I know the public is here. They've patiently waited. So I am going to have you, if you would like to speak, you may speak. I'm going to ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes, which is a very long time to speak. So, now's the time. If anyone would like to speak, please go to the podium and state your name and your address for the record. And you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Bill Connors. I'm the Executive Director of Smart Growth Greater Madison. Our address is 25 West Main Street in Madison. I have some comments on the land use table and on the dimensional standards. In the land use table, I don't understand why mixed-use residential is not a permitted use, or at least a conditional use in R3 and the MRH district. This is especially puzzling because mixed use is a permitted use in the B1 district, but the B1 district really tightly limits how much, density of residential can be allowed in it, according to the current table, but it allows mixed use in the B1, but not in those two high density residential districts at this time. So I recommend taking a look at that. There was some discussion about permitting more commercial uses, like neighborhood scale commercial uses in the MRH, and I applaud that idea. I think community cultural facilities, financial services, personal services, maybe even restaurants and taverns of some scale could be allowed in the MRH. You're trying to make a neighborhood, and it's one of the nice features of a neighborhood is if people have someplace to walk to. A walkable neighborhood exists only if there's someplace interesting to walk to. So having something besides just residential in the MRH is something I'd recommend taking a look at. In the dimensional standards, there's a height limit. I think it will be important that somehow it's defined about how you measure the height limit of a building when the lot slopes. So are you measuring it on the short side or the long side, the tall side of the building? So that'll be something to look at. And back to the MRH, there was the maximum density of 20 units, housing units per acre or something like that. And I heard Tim Schwecke say developable acres. And that's my question. Are you doing it, is the numerator gross acres or is it developable acres? Seems to me developable acres is the preferable answer, but that's something that needs to be clearly defined somewhere in this. And so I was encouraged when I heard Tim say developable acres. So that's all I got for tonight. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak?
I'll briefly go. I'm Shane Seaman. I'm at 1008 Suffolk Drive. I really liked everything that I saw today. I think this is going to move Janesville in a great direction as far as housing stock and variability of that housing. Really quickly, on parking requirements, specifically for ADUs, a standard parking stall is about 150 square feet. And if we want to mandate those parking requirements for a dwelling unit that is, 2 or 3 times the size of a parking stall, I think we have to get a little more pointed into land use generally. I'm an advocate of abolishing parking minimums generally throughout the city and even imposing parking maximums. The other thing for the mixed residential housing, curious to know about transit access. I know a lot of the discussion was about, plots around the outside of the city where development still needs to happen. Janesville transit system needs a little bit of work on that front. So just want to make sure that we are building a complete community and not just a neighborhood for those who choose to drive. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Anyone else? Okay, public comment period is closed. Well, thank you all for coming. We still have the rest of our meeting. So we're going to continue on with the director's report, I believe.
Thank you. I'll keep it brief. I included in the Planning Commission agenda materials the items that went before the City Council on August 25th, since the commission did not meet the first week here of September. Those are in your packet. I have nothing more to announce. There was some earlier comment about a public or neighborhood engagement opportunity for city-owned land on the city's south side, addressed at 2400 Boyd Avenue. That opportunity is Tuesday at two separate times, September 23rd. I'll announce this again 2 weeks from now at our next Planning Commission meeting, since it precedes this date. But at from 3 to 4:30 here in the City Council chambers, or from 6 until 7:30 p.m. that evening, you can hear and share more on at that public engagement opportunity. So that's all I had. Thank you.
All right, moving on to any Plan Commission announcements?
You nailed it earlier. That Woodland Sports and Convention Center. How about it?
I know, and I'm
Huge
excited.
thanks to all the city staff and everyone all the volunteers helping with that.
Yeah, they were working hard all through this past weekend. So, anything else?
Oh, yeah, I have that email right here.
Please note the ribbon cutting schedule has been shifted slightly. Remarks will begin at 11, with the ribbon cutting occurring at 11:30.
Great.
Guests will be arriving at 10.
Okay, well, thank you. You told me. No, anything else? All right, we're done, we're adjourned.